the financing and showing the complexity of the factors that affect the potential success of these efforts. We have as panelists Tania Sanchez, who is the coordinator of the budget, gender-sensitive budgets, with a presentation having incidents in public budgets to increase financing for gender equality, the global strategies, and the local proposals. We also have Mohamed Lintoni. Did I pronounce it correctly? Lintoni. Mohamed Lintoni from the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Morocco, with a presentation supporting the National for Gender Equality in the framework of efficiency of help. And we also have Jamini Mija, who is a specialist in sensitive budgets for Asia Pacific. And we also have Elizabeth Villagomez, who is the General of Empowerment of the Regional Office for America and the Caribbean from UN Women, with a presentation, all of them regarding multidisciplinary services for women that have been victims of violence and the experience of Asia Pacific. We're going to have as a moderator Mabaro Galsama, who is the coordinator from E4GE from Senegal. Thank you very much. I believe that my name was slightly difficult to pronounce.
Merci beaucoup. Ok. Bonjour tout le monde. Nous allons sans plus tarder
We're going to begin with Tania's presentation. Tania Sanchez, who doesn't need to be presented, and with whom we believe we all had contact throughout the preparatory phase of this seminar. Then we're going to give Tania the floor, who is going to share with us the experiences, the Bolivian experience, showing us how we can do the town hall from the costing exercises. Good morning to all of you. I would like to give a welcome to the Vice Ministry of Autonomy, who is joining us today from this morning. And I'm going to develop a brief presentation that is going to try to make a summary of Bolivia's experience, but also the lessons learned that we've had in the country, reflected in the experiences that we have been able to have in these last 2 days, and that can contribute by the same token to strengthen what can be done with the costing results. In order to begin, technology. As a premise, we have realized when we began the process of costing process that when we heard the experience of Unites is initially calculated the cost of the ODMs. And we realized that it was not enough when we began the exercise to be able to have this, it would effectively, the investment of the government, and it was necessary for the process, or the costing tools could be articulated with a process of planning and budgeting. And how could we do this? Through the budgets that were gender sensitive. Many of our countries, many of our experience have began and strengthened and promote the processes that are sensitive to gender sensitive, and that allows us to really to see the political sense that the public budget has as a tool for the distribution of public resources. In the end, in the long run, the budget does have is gender oriented, and it is not. And it's not. It has a lot to do with the life of women, and women. It's not a neutral thing. So this forced us to review how do we handle this budget. What are we talking about to be able to not be scared of what our economists and to what our the governing bodies were telling us, and they're very complicated processes, and to be able to say to them, hey, we have to learn how it is that we develop this, so that besides, we could also see how we can incorporate the gender priorities and planning and financially. So we learned on the process and the experiences that we have been seeing, that they stem from the analysis of the elaboration of the budget, which implies first to know the legislation regarding the budget. What is the legislative support that we have as a first tool? The financial sector. Also, the engineering of elaborating the budget. How do they align to the objectives of the political plans and the issue, and to be able to have necessarily to know which are the resources that we have available and how they can be redistributed, in order to be able to see what else can we do and to see how we can propose the issue there of the creation of a tax or establish some sort of a tariff which can be directed towards improving the living conditions for men and women. In Bolivia, for example, recently we just had an increase for beer tax, which is going towards or to promote, for example, milk generating companies, that is taxing beer to produce more milk. And also, we have been able to see the competencies of the sectorial levels in the elaboration of the budgets. I think that that has been made very clear in what we were commenting in the working groups, to know who has to do what and how. And if all of this approach, the legislation, would have been impossible to make the advances that we have had in Bolivia, and advances and goals that we have met, which is also necessary, as we said, not traditionally, but it's necessary to know the enemy. So yes, in order to know how it is that this can be articulated, and articulated work that initially began in the local aspect of municipalities that were very small, but also to see how it is that the national norms have impact on the local level, and how the local impact also has on the national level. Taking into account not only the territorial level, but also the alliances, strategic alliances, strategies, and a sectorial level. As an example, in the issue of health, in the issue of education, commerce, trade, etc., I believe that it has helped us also to promote and to strengthen alliances from the women's organizations, which has been a very strong characteristic in Bolivia's experience, that this whole process begins or stems from the civil society, from a very strong articulation of alliances, first of all, between women's organizations in different urban and rural spaces that have also predisposed a learning experience, but also to form alliances based on the political moment and the context that surrounds us. And that is why, for example, I was putting that on the municipal level to really find not just with the municipalities, with the supervising committees, with small business owners, with the state also, and on a municipal level and the state level, to form alliances to become articulated, but also to articulate these demands to the public instances, and also reflect this in legislation. How to create some sort of an instance to be able to show a little more in gathering some of the things that we have heard these last 2 days, to be able to continue after having done all this legislative alliance, etc., to continue the behavior to determine the behavior of the budget. Since we knew what the norm is and where can we support it, what claims can we make and our strengths and weaknesses. Now, how are we doing in the money sector? I mean, how much is being put in those things that are of our interest, and how can we build proposals based on that? In order to do that, we think it's very important to analyze the assignment that are given in the budgets and within the spaces in which we want to create a difference, whether it be national, sectorial, or territorial, from the gender focus. And we would suppose that analysis from the budget, from the gender, that first of all, if the budget really contributes to close gaps in the fulfillment of rights, if the budget contributes to redistribute the responsibility and equity and the sustainability of life, since the task of the governments is to be able to, the citizens and citizens, that's what it says in most of our constitutions, then we would know which are the responsibilities that the government has in the reproduction of the family, which in the end is the human resource that is going to strengthen the development of a country. With this, for example, the care centers, to be able to see our elderly people and to see the time that the women have in order to be able to have in the sum of the family, in the different roles that have to be carried out within the family, and the responsibility of the state. And also if the budget contributes or not to the processes. And with this I also speak about the planning process, whether they contribute or not to modify the cultural patterns for discrimination and oppression and inequality against women. We heard yesterday how strong it is that due to dogmas and religious postures, we are able to or not define that if women always have to be in private spaces and not in public spaces. And this has a lot to do with whether we have or not are able to strengthen our labor rights and our social vectors. And last but not least, to see if the planning and the budget and allows us to contribute indirectly or helps us indirectly to improve the quality of life for women and the sexually traditionally accepted. This has a lot to do with the focus to which we have had to live in the context of our country. That is to say, where and how are we going to be able to reach the living well? Because in the end, living well is how am I going to live in my community, in my family, which is not the same. The living well is for somebody that lives in Santa Cruz and I live somewhere else, or in the urban area, and according to my conditions, contextual. So with this, the process of being able to have the right to an identity, the strengthening for women, etc. And so the how we see if the budget contributes to these things has also meant a profound analysis for us with different organizations, and to be able to see and say, for instance, what is living well and how can we improve this and contribute to our development, our municipal development. And with that, we build a proposal, the methodological approach, that has been built on the women's movement and in coordination with the states certain categories for analysis of investment of budget, categories that for investment in gender. Very quickly, I'm going to tell you what this translates into in these things which I mentioned to you earlier, in which the budget carries out or not. And in order to do that, we define investment category for women, which is to analyze the budget and to see if there are programs and projects and services that are destined to close gaps. And what we said here very traditionally is that we don't have rice and milk projects, not these projects that don't really have a long-term vision of how a productive for the making of marmalades can become something that can really contribute to improve things. The investment in responsibility, in the sustainability of life, which are programs and projects and services that promote the co-responsibility of the state, of society, and all of the members in the family, at work, of social reproduction, and sustainment of life. What does this have to do with our spaces for our children are well taken care of and that we can leave them? And also, the other category which we have is the culture in equality, which is how from the municipal budget as sectorial we can promote the changes of stereotypes in the social imaginings. What I'm telling you also has been integrated into what we have as the proposal, costing proposal. And very briefly, I'm going to tell you that from these categories, which are there, if we could perhaps measure the investment in gender equality, so we could contribute, or that has an impact in the gender aspect. So for this, we would need to look at all of the budget to see if what the government is doing correctly. And it has been very difficult for us, and perhaps it's we're still in that work to be able to coordinate with our ministries of finance to be able to differentiate which investments need to be really done. It's not that we wanted to separate what budget is destined for women and which is for men, but rather how the global budget can contribute to generate conditions of equality in the gender. And we built indicators that can help us and as well as a ranking to see if we are doing or we're not doing this well. And this is an example of an institution and an organization in civil society that has analyzed the budget of all of the municipalities in a department. And we have seen, for example, which municipalities how much they invest, how much they don't invest. For example, the ones that are in red are the ones that have less than 1% of the total of their investment that are destined to projects that promote gender equality and the issues. And that is how we get a report which helps us to strengthen our strategies of incidence. And seeing a little bit better the possibilities and the opportunities that we're being offered within the context, it is a first taking of awareness. It allows us to help us. All of the knowledge of the legislation has helped us to be able to build solid arguments which are unquestionable. And what you said, it's no longer an issue of just the economist or those who know and the important themes, but also it's the issue of for everyone. And it's much easier to go to negotiate and to contribute with our governments to see if we really know what is our legal framework, that how can we develop proposals and norms and instruments that provide us, whether they be directives, instruments such as the ones that are budget classificators, and also to have an incidence in reforms and fiscal reforms. An example of this is that the pension law, we have been able to incorporate an article in relationship to that. And in order to be able to provide some examples of this which I've said, this whole issue of norm and incidence has allowed us to be able to build proposals, which were these first guidelines that the government is developing for all of the government to see what it is that needs to be invested in gender and what those problems that are being placed, and to have had some sort of an incidence in the building, for example, of the autonomy law, which is now being implemented in our country, where specifically it is defined that the state governments have to assign at least 5% of their budgets that promote gender equality and with that, and the pension law, we've been able to have an incidence as well in the legislation against violence. There's a specific article that states that all of these actions have to have a budget and that they need to modify their processes of classification and budgeting, including these resources. The same thing for the small and medium company. And it has allowed us to begin the costing processes and to take all of these learning experience to how the costing and the costing methodology that we've been developing on a step-by-step has allowed us to have an incidence in the economy and finance, the production. And what you have heard, the costing of within the framework of violence, and something that we have the policy of implementation of the legislation for violence has taken into a costing process that is in the bits of being presented. So I have enumerated these strategies that we have used, and we believe that they are common in all of the experiences, one before the other. They'll be able to socialize. That is to say, in many women's organizations, we sometimes work like little ants, but we don't socialize. So I think in these spaces, so that we can go into our country within our own context, the strengthening and the articulation of organizations, of social organizations, and with decision makers, which is something that in all moments, from different points of view, has contributed a great deal to have alliances with functional and sectorial, and also that allows us to develop mechanisms of creating awareness in the rendition of what the expenditures have made. To be able to develop all of these proposals has allowed us to see that we are doing okay. And not only we're doing well, but also allied with other sectors that have to do with the exercise of rights. And we do know, and yes, please do tell us know how it is that you're moving along. So also being able to have the access of the need for costing for policies and interventions that allow us to promote gender equality. And here we're seeing a little bit how this articulation of what is being done, the process of that has been developed in the gender-sensitive budgets with what is a methodological costing process we have contributed to as a result to be able to define interventions, specific interventions that can be carried out through public entities. That is to say, we don't want the promotion of gender equality. Now it's the how. And to really be able to land through the processes and the processes of the government. To be able to define more clearly the population with which we're going to work, with which we're going to coordinate, that is going to benefit, which is not the same thing to budget for the whole country, because we don't all have the same conditions, the same living conditions. The people that live from the Amazon region and the efficiency of and the reduction of poverty, because in the process is always not to lose the bearing that we need to have. Why do we want to do this? Why do we want to cost? What are we going to define as the intervention that we're being requested to cost? And one of the factors that we believe is how do we contribute from our actions so that the government can also promote the reduction of poverty and the execution of expenses, because having mechanisms to be able to of rendition, it also contributes so that our governments can be more efficient. the fulfillment of norms, legislations, of gender equality, and the issue of being able to define the specific cost of the interventions, and also carrying out a projection of the costs from the intervention, from the action, and once again based on diminishing the inequalities, and not only the inequalities, but also to be able to develop sustainable process of gender equality. And with this, I'd be finished. And being able to propose the cost of implementation legislations, what we have seen here with the legislation of violence, which although it's not all costed out, there is a component with which we have began, and also the articulation of the process of costing to the actions and the policies of what comes to be the budgeting this gender sensitive. And this puts us once again in the debate as to how much we need to give to fulfill the fulfillment of commitments of equality, to see if they are necessary to be able to work within the framework and the adjustment of what is already there, and to have an instance in the autonomic processes in the need to follow, continue building on knowledge and fiscal policy and the distribution of resources and the generation of the resources. Where are we going to get the resources? Where are we going to redistribute, and which ones are? And the political alliances. And to see how and why this has served us. How has the cooperation really helped us throughout this process? Because even though we have always identified as our two main players the social organizations and the government agents, we also have to see what role the cooperation plays in the improvement of the assignment of resources. First of all, take into account the mandate that we have as cooperation from different spaces to the support of the national development, the commitment of the social organization, and the different agencies in the United Nations and other types of cooperation. The fact that in one way or another, what I said yesterday, there are spaces in which we also serve a little bit as a gearing mechanism to articulate some process with the state and to bring technical assistance according to the needs that we have from the states, and to be able to share or develop processes such as the ones that we're seeing, and maintaining better practices to see how we can improve and optimize. And this is the last slide, I promise. What has what is the meaning? What has this meant? What have we seen? And a progressive improvement in gender, and at least in the municipalities and those which we have worked in the country. I also believe that in the case of Honduras, which also goes along this, and the elaboration of strengthening tools for the organizations as well as for the state, and to have a system, not a tool, but rather a system, a costing system for gender equality that has this component, political component, of being able to know what is our heading, what are we're doing, with complemented with all of these matrices and this development that is much more technical. And we also believe that that's an improvement in the appropriation of the different organizations and expressions that we have been carrying out, and how the state is also assuming these proposals in some way and modifying them and giving them a context. And it is looked at as a contribution, and for conclusions from what Karina and various of the other colleagues told us, the importance of knowing, to conciliating our demands with the social culture. We think it's very interesting, an experience, go more in depth, that we have commented, the local and national level, and the autonomous and the institutionalization and the strengthening of the social organizations, and at the two legs of the states and the organizations, we're going to kind of because we can't advance if we can't move forward if both feet aren't moving. To measure the successes. Ahora sí? The presentation, tenor presentation, has allowed us to understand that the alliances that are very important, particularly the alliances with women's organizations, the knowledge of budgeting, to be able to analyze, to see if their budget favors women, to be able to know their budget categories, to be able to answer to the gender equality. And I believe that the presentation, Tanya's presentation, allows us to understand, before we make the presentation, we have to have a certain knowledge and analysis capacity in order to be able to show the importance of costing in gender and gender equality. So we're going to be able to continue learning in this next presentation, which is going to be done by Mohammed, Mr. Mohammed from Morocco. So you have the floor. I am Mohammed from the Ministry of Finance of Morocco. I am in charge of from the Ministry of so I'm going to talk about the period from 2002 till 2002 in the budget, Morocco's budget. So I'm going to give the experience there that for integration. This is, it has as a reference in the Mohammed the gender equality, and it's also a factor that needs to be considered in the new constitution is going to benefit of all the rights of freedom of civil and economic, social, and environmental. To be able to, in Morocco, to be able in favor of the content of the international agreements, such as the carrying out of the Millennium Objectives for Development up until the year 2015, and also the ratification of the Convention regarding the eradication of discrimination against women. In Morocco, we benefit from an judiciary arsenal through the family code, work code, and the code of nationality. I'm not getting translation, sorry. This is the framework in which we're working. The right to be able to give the nationality to women for single women. The disposition of the new constitution of the year 2011 is going to be reinforcing the principle of equality as a concept, a general concept for the election of a state for citizens, and this is based basically on equality, equal rights of responsibility, of the measures, and the possibility of being able to grow. I'm also going to be talking about the recognition of the value and the contribution of women on the public and private level. We have to take into consideration the needs and the obligations, the interests. I'm not getting also, we can take the disposition and constitution that is relative between equality between men and women to be able to reach the equality. The autonomy for women and the totality of their situation, fighting against the factors that contribute and violence, the promotion of culture, that gender equality, is to be able to promote equality, gender equality through essentially the development and product and sectorial that contribute to equality amongst gender, and also to contribute to consolidation of women. And what are we working in this plan? First of all, the institution of the principles of equality and the launching of the rules of parity. Second, all forms of interpretation against women. Last, the rehabilitation of the educational system and of training based on equity and equality. Fourth, of an equitable that is equanimous in the health services. And fifth, the infrastructures to be able to improve the living conditions of women and of second, to make an autonomy and empowerment, social empowerment of women. Seventh, make an autonomous to have a fair access and sustainable to the decision-making process at an administrative level. The governmental plan of sex, the principal meanings. The first, the ministerial for equality. The second, the creation of a technical commission, interministerial, that it will be in charge of the integration of the gender, then the planning and the program of the different sectors, and another part towards within the statistical system. And last but not least, the elaboration of a judicial framework for women's protection, entirely